I did not make one mortgage during or prior to the mortgage crisis. So I take great offense to anybody who calls me the foreclosure king.
Democrats bestowed that title on Mnuchin during his nomination, accusing him of profiting from the financial crisis while he ran the lender One West, a lender, by the way, that the company that became One West did make a bunch of mortgages. The hearing got heated when Congressman Keith Ellison brought up robo-signing, infamous, improper foreclosure practices.
I don't even
He was later criticized for not providing records of financial ties between Russia and the president, but clearly some tense moments in that hearing.
No question. All right, Jeff Sessions speaking out for the first time since President Trump began targeting him with a barrage of public criticism. The Attorney General standing by his
begin it.
Change. But Senator Lynsey Graham cautioning the president there will be holy hell to pay if he fires the Attorney General.
Holy hell.
Russia ordering the U.S.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm glad Sessions finally spoke out. There's been a lot of bullshit said on they're both grown men, and I'm pretty sure that they've both been criticized at once in their lifetime, so they'll be okay through all this. Right here's a big piece of news I wanted to go over this morning. Get rid of some of these windows here.
in a tweet, saying he's very disappointed in the country and that it had done nothing for the U.S. when it comes to North Korea. The reclusive state's main ally says it opposes the missile launches and hopes all parties act with caution to prevent tensions from escalating. But U.S. Air Force officials are preparing for the worst, saying their troops are ready to respond rapid, local, and open the time comes.
My this morning, you have to look up. Excuse me. That they're not going to stop testing missiles, and we're not going to stop trying to make them stop. So it's inevitable. It's going to happen very soon. I just don't know when. I just dread to see any type of conflict after the war that we just recently got out of, if you want to even call it that. That's what this video's about.
우리 당과 국가 군대의 최고 용도자 김정은의 직접적인 지도 밑에
We don't want to watch that. Just moving on along. Critical comments. He reviewed the final version and, based on its responsiveness to his negotiations, approves the bill and intends to sign it. The House overwhelmingly voted to pass the bill 419 to 3, and the Senate followed suit with 98 to 2 vote. The large margins ensure that Congress would be able to override any potential veto from the President. The legislation, which also punishes Iran and North Korea, will place additional financial sanctions on Moscow for using military aggression in Ukraine and Syria. Democrats losing talking points. While Democrats have peddled and will more than likely continue to do so, theories that Trump colluded with the Russians in the 2016 election, the signing of the legislation is another major blow to their narrative. More importantly, this piece of legislation is nonpartisan. It seeks to take the decisive think it may have been Gage Skidmore. I'm not for sure. It really don't give no name on who wrote this article. Sorry to say. But anyways, it in Maryland, Justice Department officials testify on foreign agent linked towards him, and he used his political power to extort, I guess you would say, money from the other richest people in Russia. According to him, there's just like I don't know, 4 or 5 really rich people in Russia, and he pretty much used imprisonment, like whatever it's called, where like the CIA
Vladimir Putin's own money that he holds in the West could potentially be frozen. And then we go down below Vladimir Putin, and there's many other oligarchs who have a lot of money in the West who are involved in all sorts of terrible things in Russia.
So obviously they would all have a lot at stake with the sanctions that are under discussion here. Today, you were very clear that Russian intelligence knew about.
Well, I can tell you with 100% certainty that the Russian intelligence services would have been aware of that meeting in advance as they were plotting it out. They would have.
This is slow loading video. I apologize.
Money that he holds in the West could potentially be frozen. And then we go down below Vladimir Putin, and there's many other oligarchs who have a lot of money in the West who are involved in all sorts of terrible things in Russia.
So obviously they would all have a lot at stake with the sanctions that are under discussion here. Today, you were very clear that Russian intelligence knew about this meeting.
Well, I can tell you with 100% certainty that the Russian intelligence services would have been aware of that meeting in advance as they were plotting it out. There would have been weeks spent studying how to best achieve the results in that meeting.
Now, Bill, you've also told me the Russian lawyer, without a doubt, was working on behalf of the Russian government. So do you think that there was a follow-up to this meeting or even more meetings?
I don't know whether there was any follow-ups. I don't know whether any of the offers they made were accepted, but I can guarantee you that this was something that was discussed at an extremely high level in Russia before and after.
So, you know, everyone in the meeting, Donald Trump Jr. has said, look, it was a waste of my time. It was 20 minutes I wish I could get back. The response we've heard from the president as well as his son is that the meeting actually was about adoption of Russian children. Here they are.
It just was sort of nonsensical, inane and garbled, and then quickly went on to, a story about Russian adoption and how we could possibly help.
I guess they talked about, as I see it, they talked about adoption and some things. Adoption wasn't even a part of the campaign.
And there was nothing, that, as far as we know, that would lead anyone to believe that there was anything except for a discussion about adoption, the Maginski Act.
You made it very clear in today's hearing that you do not believe that they were talking about the adoption of children, right?
That's correct. Whenever anyone mentions adoption in relation to Russians, they're talking about Magnitsky sanctions against Russian torturers and murderers. Adoption is effectively a code word. Basically what happened was that when the Magnitsky sanctions were put in place, Vladimir Putin got so mad that he then banned the adoption of orphans, Russian orphans, by American families. There was no talk about adoption. It's a talk about allowing Russian torturers and murderers to freely spend their money and come to the U.S.
So, you know, Donald Trump himself spoke to Vladimir Putin, of course, as we know, at the G20. And there was an undisclosed conversation that they had. We now know about it. Donald Trump spoke to the New York Times about it, and the president says that this meeting with Vladimir Putin was also about adoption. Here he is.
Adoption.
Actually, it was very interesting. We talked about adoption. You did? Russian adoption, yeah. I've always found that interesting because, you know, he ended that years ago. Mm-hmm. And I actually talked about Russian adoption with him, which is interesting because that was a part of the conversation that Don had.
Does the president not know adoption is a code word for Russian sanctions and the Magnitsky Act to Vladimir Putin, or what?
I don't know what the president knows or he doesn't know, but I guarantee you that Vladimir Putin wasn't talking about adoptions. He was talking about repealing this piece of legislation, which is the single largest foreign policy priority he has. He hates the Magnitsky Act, and if he's linking it to adoptions, the main purpose of his conversation was trying to get this sanctions legislation repealed.
So he actually weighed in on this today, taking questions from the press. President Putin was asked about the investigation into Russian meddling in the United States and about possible new sanctions, of course, the Congress seems eager to impose. And here's what he said about the whole situation.
What we
we see is merely a growth of anti-Russian hysteria and utilization of Russophobia for domestic policies.
Anti-Russian hysteria and Russophobia?
When asked that question during his testimony, he said that he guaranteed that Trump didn't know that Vladimir Putin was referring to repealing this legislation and was referring to it as adoption, by the way.
That's people look. Everybody says, "I'm going to stand up to them," when in fact it's all about him stealing money from people, killing people, and then trying to hide behind this nationalism.
All right. Thank you very much, Bill Browder. I appreciate your time as always. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
I am going to do some more research into this Bill Browder character. I'm not aware of who he is until today, actually. But yeah, I saw that testimony on YouTube, and it related to the whole Russia thing, so I watched it. And I wouldn't say that I would recommend anybody else watch it. I don't know, I wouldn't recommend that you not watch it. It was pretty interesting, but that's just if you been following this whole Russia stupid stuff, whatever. Saw an article on the Conservative Institute this morning saying something about Hillary was in big trouble, so I had to share this. But anyway, I'll give that a second to load. I'll go ahead and read these Bible verses. James 5:14. Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church and pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And Jeremiah 17:14. Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are the one I praise. And Psalms 32 says, Lord my God, I call to you for help, and you healed me. See if I can find another good one here. Isaiah 25:7 and 8. On this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will sweep away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. Okay. Again, I'm not seeing who wrote this article, but it's from the conservativeinstitute.org. Breaking. Hillary Clinton in major trouble. July 29th, 2017. While the media is focused on Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is tasked with investigating Trump's alleged links to Russia, House Republicans may authorize a second special counsel. About 2 dozen Republican publicity. Let me start over. About 2 dozen Republicans have publicly asked the Justice Department to name a second special counsel in order to investigate both the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton. The letter signed by House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte, Republican from Virginia, significantly names Clinton, former FBI Director James Comey, and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Crimes in question. The letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein highlights at least 14 alleged crimes of, quote, matters, end quote, that House Republicans wanted investigated. The list includes the possible influence of the Ukrainian government on the Clinton campaign, Lynch's alleged obstruction of the investigation of Clinton, and James Comey's role in the leak of the crucial memos. Another possible avenue for investigation includes the Clinton Foundation's involvement with the Russian government. Significantly, they are alleged that the Clinton Foundation received $2.35 million from Russia for the sale of 1/5 of America's uranium supply. Thank you, Lord. Obama included, ? Although he is not named in the letter, there is a possibility that former President Barack Obama will be investigated by his proposed second counsel. The crime that the counsel may investigate war on Special Counsel Robert Mueller. President Trump and his surrogates have criticized that Mueller for leading an expensive, quote, witch hunt based on flimsy evidence. It's a criticism that is almost guaranteed to be mimicked by Democrats should Clinton become the target of a special counsel. However, despite a fairly large base of potential evidence, including former Obama officials and Hillary Clinton, there is no guarantee that a second counsel will be created. The move by congressional Republicans is the first step in what could prove to be a long journey into the bowels of the corrupt Clinton machine. I found this morning on the rebel.media, how Obama committed the biggest theft in history.
in the history of the planet Earth.
It likely is the biggest theft in history. And whether the number is 80 billion or 130 billion, it's probably around $100 billion.
But they stole a golden goose.
Yeah.
So there is no final number. It's going to make billions this year.
Absolutely. And what happened was, in the crash, they passed a law, Congress, the Housing and Economic Recovery Act, that basically said we had to give Fannie and Freddie some money, about $180 billion, but it was only designed as a temporary loan to get them back on their feet, and then they were going to continue operating. Well, internal administration, Obama administration officials and people at Treasury said, hey, why are we just going to take a 10% dividend from this money? Why don't we take all the profits? Ended up doing. But then the documents make very clear they knew that wasn't the reason. The reason was they wanted to keep all the money. So,
well, it sounds like an obvious case of fraud, because the way they sold it to the public was, I'm just going to loan these guys money, and then we'll be even after they pay it back, and that's what we do. We're a loan company. And then they did something completely different. They took it permanent.
They actually share Canadian values.
toward Justin Trudeau's welcome wagon filled with government welfare goodies. That should be the first red flag. This is discriminatory and hypocritical, especially coming from a government that appears say their daughter will cause what they call equivalent to get a grown-up job here in Canada and take care of your family. Stable child like this. I'm appalled, and I rarely make requests, but I'm going to ask you for your help. Sometimes the government needs to remember who they're working for, and that means us. So I want you to write a polite email or leave a polite message. And I stress the word polite here for the Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, Ahmed. Tell me.
Not that I'm against any kind of immigrants or anything like that. I'm just against the kind that claims to be a religion of peace, when in reality they live for a word that comes from their religion called jihad, which means commentators say in a shake-up, Trump replaced us after only 6 months as chief of staff, installing in his place the Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, a retired Marine Corps four-star general with little experience in civilian government or the legislative process. Trump announced the move in a tweet a day after his new communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, accused Priebus of leaking information to reporters in a vulgar tirade that made Republicans stalwart wince. The brash Scaramucci called the chief of staff, quote, a effing paranoid schizophrenic, end quote. Trump, a former Democrat, styled himself as an outsider when taking on the Republican establishment during the party's primaries. When he pulled off a shock victory, many were reluctant to embrace him, but did so out of expediency. It is still said most would secretly prefer the Vice President Mike Pence to be in charge, but Priebus, whose 189-day tenure was the shortest in modern history for a White House Chief of Staff, followed Deputy Chief of Staff Katie Walsh, Communications Director Mike Dubke, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, and Press Aide Michael Short in being asked or opted to resign. One by one, Trump's links with the party establishment is becoming severed. While the establishment is in retreat, Trump's inner circle is dominated by two constituencies: nationalists such as Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, and New Yorker and Democratic leaning including Jared Kushner, Gary Cohn, Dina Powell, and Scaramucci. Trump's allies had long been critical for Priebus for bringing Republican insiders to the White House and overlooking those who helped him get elected. Trump himself is said to have regarded Priebus as weak and have publicly demeaned him. The Washington Post reported, quote, at one point during a meeting in the Oval Office, a fly began buzzing overhead, distracting the president as the fly continued to circle Trump, summoned his chief of staff, and tasked him with killing the insect, according to someone familiar with the incident. The paper added, quote, the West Wing has a regular fly problem, end quote. Despite the deep Republican concern, Priebus could not weigh in significantly New York on Friday, quote, they should not have approved health care last night, but you can have everything. Oh boy, they've been working on that one for 7 years. Can you believe that? The swamp. But we'll get it done. We're going to get it done, end quote. Feeling the blame appeared mutual. The website Axios reported, quote, heard at House Republican conference meeting member standing at the mic in conference blasting Trump. One called him an embarrassment.
For me, I've never been a journalist, but I have played a journalist on television. I used to host Wall Street Week for Fox Business. I sort of don't like and I have been personal friends for 6 years. We are a little bit like brothers, where we rough each other up once in a while, which is totally normal for brothers.
As you know from the Italian expression, the fish stinks from the head down. But I can tell you two fish that don't stink, okay? And that's me and the president.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said she did not think Priebus's departure would affect the White House relations with the Republican Party. Quote, I think we've still got a pretty good relationship. We're going to continue working with the party and doing what we came here to do, end quote. Trump has no legislative achievements for his first 6 months in office. His chances of introducing tax and infrastructure reform look increasingly precarious. The president is also increasingly threatened by the investigation headed by former FBI Director Robert Mueller into links between the administration and Russia, and he faces a string of crises on the international front, from North Korea's increasingly active nuclear missile program to growing that Russia never wanted him to become president, citing a news report claiming that a hostile rescue firm which produced a salacious scare about Trump called out other commissioned by Russia. Trump tweeted, quote, in other words, Russia was against Trump in the 2016 election, and why not? I want strong military and low oil prices, period. Witch hunt, exclamation mark, end quote. On Friday, That's all the articles I've rounded up this morning. I had a couple more other day, but I must have not saved them like I thought I did. So I haven't been able to find them. I was looking this morning, but I could not find them. I did find out some more about CERN this morning. If any of y'all knows anything about CERN, it's a particle accelerator in Switzerland. Mayday. / Nimrod. So y'all may remember the big archaeological find between
something which could be interpreted as a burial. He said the amazing discovery of the ancient city under the Iraqi desert had been made possible by modern technology. He adds, by differences in magnetization in the soil, you can look into the ground. The difference between mud bricks and sediments in the Euphrates River gives a very detailed structure. This creates a magnetogram, which is then digitally mapped, effectively giving a town plan of Uruk. It was a Venice in the desert. The most surprising thing was that we found structures already described by Gilgamesh. We covered more than 100 hectares. We found garden structures and field structures as depicted in the epic, and we found Babylonian houses. He also said the most astonishing find was the incredibly sophisticated system of canals, adding, very, very clearly we can see the canals, some structures showing that flooding destroyed some houses, which means it was a highly developed system. So why is it so interesting that his tomb has been found? It's interesting considering that Gilgamesh was believed to be part human, part alien, part angel. He was Nephilim, Anunnaki, Nephilim, fallen angels, the offspring of the fallen angels, as in Genesis 6, notably what we could call a hybrid. It's also interesting to note that Gilgamesh has been compared to and could very well be King Nimrod, who was the son of Cush and a descendant of Noah and the king of Babylon. The same Nimrod that built the Tower of Babel, translated as the gateway to heaven, to defy God. And we mentioned this regarding the overwhelming amount of information that has come to light recently of DNA genetic manipulation and its use in science and technology even today. Was the Iraq invasion a forward smokescreen for the enablement of Western powers to gain ancient alien technologies and possible DNA for future engineering and a possible resurrection and cloning of a DNA angel, yep. Gilgamesh Nimrod?
Yep.
There are those who believe that that is so. There are those who believe that there was a driving force behind the resurrection of Nimrod, Gilgamesh, primary unto you, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning come out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:25-28. In a recent interview on Omega Men Radio, Tom Horn and Steve Quayle talked about the discovery of that carcass of course, Gilgamesh.
You see this statue? You see this statue right here, guys? Okay, this is Nimrod, and this thing right here that he's holding ain't no kitten. It's a lion. If that tells you anything about who or what was.
They began talking about how Nimrod began to become a giant. And then they started talking about the discovery of Gilgamesh's remains. And Steve Quayle said, I talked to Special Operations General who validated that, verified that, and absolutely was there when Gilgamesh's remains, and his words were, he was in a state of remarkable preservation. And by the way, that was in the literal vicinity of where the United States built its largest military complex. I believe it's one of the largest military complexes in the world. In that whole area, the advanced team Special Operations went in there to grab all that stuff. that the whole point of the Human Genome Project is to locate specific genetic markers for the disembodied spirits to reanimate their host body that's brought back. So this is in fact Babylon Rising, the return of the Nephilim. And Steve Quayle goes on to say that he believes that this is indeed the real reason of remaining in Iraq for the better part of the last decade. The fact that U.S. troops are now coming back out of Babylon tells us that they have accomplished whatever it is they needed to do, which makes us wonder what or who else may be coming out of Babylon with them. I'll leave a link below for you for these articles.
Okay. So, they tried to define God by building the Tower of Babel. They were going to take over heaven and kill God. But as you know, may have read in the Bible, God sent his angels thousands of years before Noah, I guess. Like back then, the earth, all continents were connected. It was on that Pangea thing, whatever they call it, the supercontinent. After this, he's known as Nimrod, Gilgamesh, Osiris, I don't know, a bunch of different names. Anyways, later on, I don't know what happened between then and this, but his brother was the great hunter. I forget his name. But he killed Nimrod with a mortal head wound. He cut his head off, and then he cut his body up into 13 pieces. Okay? He then comes home and tells his father that can have well, anyways, he tells his dad that he didn't want his inheritance or something like that. All he wanted was a bowl of beans. Okay, so here's the book of Jasher. I don't know if it's in here or what. I don't think so, because it's already talking about Noah. But anyways, Isis comes along, and she finds out about Nimrod's death, and so she goes out into the wilderness, and she gathers up all of his body parts. Remember I told you that his brother cut him into 13 pieces? Well, she takes those 13 pieces and puts them back together. Or, no, she takes 12 of the 13 pieces and puts them back together. And she, wraps him up in the cloth, whatever, makes him into a mummy. And all but that one missing part, which is the part that makes a man. And so this is where the number 13 comes from in the occult. This is where the whatever that thing is, Washington Monument is, it's Obulus, is it? Yeah, it's an obulus. That's where the obulus comes from too. It's a symbol of the final 13th missing part. And here you have the most famous obulus, at least in our country, I guess. You can see how that can symbolize, the male organ, I guess. At least I hope you can. Anyways, that's what they're doing with CERN. They're trying to resurrect these fallen angels, these Nephilim. And not only that, I just thought I'd give you a little reminder. On February the 23rd of 2017, the resurrection of the fulfilled. And if y'all know anything about it, It's about the story about the woman who was heavy with child and ready to give birth, and the dragon. It's pretty interesting. I'll let y'all watch a little bit about it. But this is a common 6,000-year-old prophecy, and it will soon be filled within.
Of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Jesus calls such events fearful sights and great signs from heaven. The great sign from heaven will be the largest sign that has ever heralded a prophetic event. We are on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It is 3 on moon feet. Sunlight floods the sky, and since the Virgin is clothed in the sun, we cannot see her, so we turn off her artwork. But the prophecy clearly states that the great sign is to appear in the heaven. High noon approaches. Then, on this special day, the sun turns as black as sackcloth, and the stars quickly fill the sky. Just like on the day of the crucifixion, it will remain dark for an incredible 3 hours. We stop the motion and zoom in. We fill the screen with our 2 constellations. To better see how the constellations are formed, we generate blue lines between their stars.
I think this right here would be Jupiter. I'm not for sure.
Leaving us with the lines of each constellation. We first turn our attention to the constellation of Leo. In Leo, the alpha or brightest star is Regulus, the regal king star. 8 additional bright stars are used to form the constellation. But this leaves us 3 stars short of the 12 stars prophesied to crown the Virgin. On this special day, 3 wandering stars are in rare formation within the boundaries of Leo.
Mercury,
They are
Mars.
Venus, Mars, and Mercury. This gives us the prophesied 12 stars to form the crown. Now we move to Virgo. Her left hip is formed by the alpha star named Spica, which means the seed. Her right hip is formed by the zeta star named Hes, which means the branch. On this day, the Virgin is to give birth to the king planet between these 2 stars. Like all the planets, Jupiter, which images the Messiah, was misnamed and misdescribed by the Greeks. The king planet images the rest of the Messiah. of human gifts. So we can see this wonder that causes in the of all these actions into a great sign brings to life the exact imagery of the prophecy. However, if this sign were to occur repeatedly in the course of the travels of the planets, then how could we interpret it as a significant event? How often does this configuration occur in the heavens?
Once every
The answer,
6,000
it
years.
occurs only this one time. At no other time is the Virgin clothed in the sun, with the moon at her feet, while she is wearing a crown of 12 stars. Any other time throughout history, from the day of Adam, 6,000 years in the past, until the end of the millennial reign, 1,000 years into our future.
Awesome.
Yet, this wonder was described in detail in Revelation chapter 12, nearly 2,000 years ago. The astounding fulfillment of this great prophecy, a clarion blast of God's trumpet, broadcasting to all. Of the hour, the Lord has foretold time and again that not one person who calls upon his name will be lost. The shouting and terror begins. Jerusalem will be safe from the firestorm because of the earth's rotation. In contrast, unmitigated disaster falls upon the Western world. And the Lord will cause his voice of authority to be heard, and the striking of his arm will be seen in the indignation of his fierce anger, and a flame of consuming fire, in driving rain, a torrent, and hail. When he all those we love. Dawn in the shadow of Congress. It is the day of the great sign. Forerunners of the firestorm of the Golden Empire streak the sky. The end is with shouts of second. In 2014, the Caliphate of Islam was reborn. This event constitutes the birth of the little horn, the eighth prophetic king described in Revelation chapter 17. It will become the empire of the beast. The great comet carrying the Rosetta probe passed into the constellations of the great sign on the very day of the fourth blood moon, stitching together this hearing will serve notice before the eyes of the world. The time of events foretold by the Lord has arrived. All this means the great sign in heaven has full authority to function as an event legally documenting the final great warning of God. The Lord is the great prophet. As a prophet, he is accountable to warn all who are under his ministry. The great wonder in the great sign in heaven is the colossal herald proclaiming that the prophetic troubles of the last days have arrived. Most of us refuse to believe God's work by faith, while we will believe his working through a sign. So God is going to give us a sign, a great sign. This great sign will herald sudden and great judgment. But why? The rebel lawmakers of the Golden Empire for the day of battle. Like little David, all he needs is some rocks. The day of battle arrives. It is a day of fearful sights and great signs from heaven. The Lord takes aim, and the golden Goliath suddenly falls. The empire will die in 1 hour, unrepentant in its wickedness. The unrepentant empire and the church in the unrepentant empire have together refused to confess the empire's fatal sin. What is this fatal sin that brings such sudden judgment? Our fatal sin is the replacement of holiness with human rights as our guiding moral principle in life and government. This is in direct opposition to the Lord's decree, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." The manifest insanity of pornographic rights, abortion rights, and homosexual rights is the diseased fruit of the doctrine of human rights. This is why evil has become good, and good has become evil in our land. The unrepentant adherence to the doctrine of human rights that is producing the trampling of the holiness of God in our courts is the guarantee of the firestorm of the Golden Empire. Your only hope will be to turn to the Lord Jesus Christ. For Jesus himself said, "As earnestly as I can say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." In the same conversation with Nicodemus, Jesus also said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Call on his name with all your heart. Please do not risk one day's wait. Everyone